This video is for fun, please don't crucify me. Alright everyone, do you like Pokemon? Do you like science? Well, if you do, today's your lucky day. I am merging the two in an unholy matrimony for yet another internet conspiracy. Join I,
the young weed,
as we delve into the possible yet wildly improbable science of the Noir Orb Pokemon hypothesis. Take heed! Now listen up, kids. I know you know Pokemon, but you don't know Pokemon like I know Pokemon. I know Pokemon better than you all, because apparently I'm the only one that noticed these bad boys look alike. That's right. I bet you can see it now too, huh? Well, there's more where that came from. A lot of Pokemon from the earlier generations have a very similar feature. Jesus Christ, what the fuck? It's that a good amount of Pokemon have a simplistic black body with some varying outer layer that usually encases it. Most of the black or noir bodies are round and shaped like orbs, which makes them easy to spot, especially in the earlier generations. But if we start looking closely down the line of Pokemon from later generations, we can start finding some less simplistic noir orb Pokemon like Unknown, Wobbuffet, Snorunt, even Pokemon as recent as Cosmog. This idea bounces off the theory that Mew is the first genetic ancestor of all Pokemon, only that this Pokemon, that I'm going to dub as Noorb from now on, get it, is the first non-mythical and non-legendary Pokemon to exist after Mew. Essentially, it was the first Pokemon to come straight from Mew. You get it. Based on the evidence I've collected, Noorb was just a Pokemon that looked like a simple black blob or ball with large eyes, and that's it, son. It was most likely incredibly durable, malleable, and able to withstand any and all environments through the power of adaptation.
Well, how do you know it could adapt so quickly?
You silly butts may be asking. Well, since Noorb would have been the first Pokemon to come after Mew, it would make sense that it would be able to transform as well. Duh. But since there were no Pokemon to transform into at this point, it would most likely make sense that it would transform itself to suit its new environments.
Double Duck.
Furthermore, Noorb would be able to reproduce similar to how Grimers reproduce. How do Grimers reproduce, you may be asking? The Pokedex entry states as it moves, it loses bits of its body from which new Grimer emerge. The first Noorb would have to reproduce the same way, ensuring its survival rate as a species. As time passed, this simple Pokemon grew, spread, and adapted from its different environments, and eventually evolved into the different Pokemon that we've grown to know and love today, eventually disappearing into history. So, if you dumb bubblegum looking ass bitches have had a hard time following all that, here's my hypothesis. Many existing Pokemon have come from a common ancestor Pokemon that directly descended from Mew that I have dubbed as Noorb, coming from the words Noir and Orb meaning black ball. It shared Mew's ability to transform, making it an almost invincible, ever-adapting and asexually reproducing beast of a Pokemon that spread throughout the entire world very rapidly and adapted to become the Pokemon we know today. My evidence for this comes in two parts. The first part is the visible relation between Noorb's physical appearance and today's Pokemon's appearance. The second part of my evidence comes from an abandoned Pokemon design, which I will get into later. Firstly, here's my list of Pokemon that I've deemed to have at least a trace element of Noorb in its structure. Tentacruel, Shelder, Cloyster, Ghastly, Tangela and Tangrowth, Jinx, Kabuto, Unknown, Girafarig, Wynaut and Wobbuffet, Fortress, Snorunt, Glalie, Darkrai, Lileep, Cradily, Sigilif, Yamask, Cafagrigus, Pyukumuku, Minior, Mimikyu, Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Tapu Bulu, Tapu Fini, Cosmog, Cosmoem, and possibly even the UB Assembly Stakataka. Now that's a lot of Pokemon, so I've broken down this list into 3 categories. Category number 1 is called obvious, number 2 is subtle, and number 3 is recessive. Some Pokemon will fall under multiple categories. Now why the Pokemon in the category of obvious are categorized in category obvious is, well, obvious. It's because the Noorb form is very easy to pick out. You can see how these Pokemon are related and are obviously similar. The Pokemon that fall under this obvious category are Tentacruel, Shelder, Cloyster, Ghastly, Tangela, Tangrowth, Kabuto, Unknown, Lileep, Cradily, and Pyukumuku. The Pokemon Tentacruel, Shelder, Kabuto, and Pyukumuku probably came from the Noorbs that went into the ocean and adapted in different sea environments, while Pokemon like Ghastly and Unknown developed in rarefied or abstruse environments. Tangela and Lileep developed in the jungle or some shit, you get the picture. Now, Unknown is a special case in this list. They are incredibly close to the source material of an original Noorb design. It has a simplistic black body with a large white eye similar to Noorb's eyes. In the instance of Unknown coming into existence, it is possible that a Noorb found a cave with primitive language written within it. Eventually, it multiplied and they adapted to live on the cave walls, copying the grooves of the letters etched onto the walls by early humans. So now, let's just pretend that Noorb was a real Nintendo official licensed Pokemon. Noorb would finally be enough evidence to reveal that in the Pokemon universe, language came first and that unknown came second. So there, just a little bonus conspiracy for you crazy kids. Fucking psychos. So that basically sums it up for Category 1, or the obvious category. There's not much more to it other than that there's an obvious physical relation between modern Pokemon and Noorb. Next, we have Category 2, or the Pokemon that fall under the subtle category, which are as follows. Wynot, Wobbuffet, Fortress, Snorunt, Glalie, Darkrai, Sigilyph, Yamask, Fagrigus, Minior, Mimikyu, Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, Tapu Fini, Tapu Bulu, Cosmog, Cosmoem, and Stakataka. The Pokemon listed in this category have a trace of the Noorb feature in their design, but it's difficult to pinpoint without examining closely. I presume that some of these Pokemon have also had more time to further develop into their environments, giving the Noorb body more time to alter and change what it looks like, leaving it somewhat the same, but changing most other features about it. Pokemon like Fortress and Mimikyu that have their actual body hidden inside a carapace or under a cloth are impossible to decipher until Nintendo decides to release what's under the hood, but there's still a chance it's a Noorb-like creature inside, so they're going to be placed in this category based off of suspicion alone. Other Pokemon like Snorunt, Glalie, Darkrai, Sigilyph, Yamask, Fagrigus, Cosmog, Cosmoem, and the Tapu deities have the black bodies that point towards the sign of a Noorb feature, but those aren't definitive evidence. Although again, it is possible that the Noorb has just developed far enough to become almost unrecognizable. Unfortunately, it's also difficult to tell with ghost Pokemon, as their bodies may just be resembling shadows rather than exhibiting a Noorb feature. Now the Pokemon Wynot and Wobbuffet are a different case. They're probably some of the most important Pokemon in the subtle category, mostly Wobbuffet to be specific, as some of its Pokedex entry states, usually docile, a Wobbuffet strikes back ferociously if its black tail is attacked. To keep its pitch black tail hidden, it lives quietly in the darkness. It desperately tries to keep its black tail hidden. It is said to be proof the tail hides a secret. The tail hides a secret? What might that possibly mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means, kid. The tail of a Wobbuffet is the actual Pokemon, while the blue body just acts as a defense mechanism. And what does that tail look like? Pitch black? With large eyes? It's basically just a Noorb with a fat blue shield attached to it. Sure, it's shaped a little funny, but it has the black body and large eyes of a Noorb, which fits the description very closely. This unique development of a Noorb goes to show that these ancient Pokemon could adapt in ways that keep their Noorb feature not only intact, but adapted in ways incredibly specific to their environment or territorial situation. Just burped. When you break open the outer rock on a Minior, it shows its pink undersurface, which doesn't help out my point much. But if you so happen to find a shiny Minior, the inner body is instead black with white eyes. This could mean that a Noorb could have somehow made it into the atmosphere, theoretically survived and reproduced, and adapted into what eventually became the Pokemon that is Minior. And yes, I know that it seems a little out there that a primitive Pokemon like Noorb could have made it into the atmosphere, but my next Pokemon in this list should prove that Noorbs could get just about anywhere with a bit of luck. Stakataka, the Ultra Beast. This bad boy has everything to do with everything. It is very possible that Stakataka could have been a Noorb that somehow accidentally made it into Ultra Space. According to its Pokedex entry,
It appeared from an ultra wormhole. Each one appears to be made up of many life forms stacked one on top of each other.
small life forms with a simple body and a large eye. Seems to give off a strong similarity to Unknown. Although unlike Unknown, instead of adapting and evolving in the solitude environment of a cave, the Noorbs that developed in Ultra Space stuck together in their harsh new environment, figuring their strength came in numbers and eventually formed what came to be Stakataka. But how would it be possible for Noorbs to get into Ultra Space? Well, I'll tell you, you foolish fools.
Necrozma, bitch!
You heard me right, Necrozma. If you read Necrozma's Pokedex entries, you can see that it's thought to have come from another world in ancient times and is reminiscent of the Ultra Beasts, meaning that it came from Ultra Space, most likely thousands of years ago, opening an Ultra Wormhole and allowing at least a single Noorb to enter, repopulate, and adapt to the new environment. But hey, still not enough evidence for you guys? Well, I've got more, so buckle in, let me lay it on you real quick. We now go into Category 3, the Recessive category. There's only 4 Pokemon in this category: Tentacruel, Fortress, Jinx, and Girafarig. Now before we biopsize these Pokemon, we need to talk about Pokemon evolution. And before we talk about Pokemon evolution, we need to talk about Infinity Energy and genetics. You guys are hopefully smart, so I'm going to assume you all know how genetics work. Now if you don't know what Infinity Energy is, that's fair. In layman's terms, it's the energy that makes up humans and Pokemon. When a human or Pokemon dies, they leave their bodily selves and turn back into the energy that once made them. But the difference between humans and Pokemon is that the Pokemon have the unique ability to turn back into their Infinity Energy forms while still alive. Kind of terrifying if you think about it. There's 3 instances we know of this. When a Pokemon gets sent into a computer storage, trade, or transfer system, gets captured, returned, or released from a Pokeball, or when they evolve. Although, it is in a much larger proportion of energy when a Pokemon is evolving. When a Pokemon evolves, it goes through an incredibly high energy metamorphic-like state, similar to that of a real-life butterfly going through their own metamorphic period. A caterpillar will literally liquefy itself into a gooey mess of proteins and fibers inside the cocoon where it will reform its new body over the course of about 10 days. Pokemon, on the other hand, are able to instantaneously do that metamorphosis within mere seconds, although instead of protein goo, they turn into pure Infinity Energy. This will not only change their appearance, but will improve upon their previous form. Just as a butterfly body does to their previous caterpillar body. However, when a caterpillar is still a caterpillar, there is no way to tell what nuanced phenotypes a caterpillar might inherit from its parents until it is a butterfly. For example, if 2 white-winged butterflies both carried a recessive gene of having white wings with black dots on it, they would pass it down to their caterpillar children. However, you would never know that when the baby caterpillars hatched, they were destined to have white wings with black dots because they are caterpillars, not butterflies. Only once they went through their metamorphosis would you see that the butterfly offspring have black polka dots on their wings. Theoretically, this process should work the exact same way with Pokemon evolution. When a Pokemon evolves, its high levels of Infinity Energy cause instantaneous genetic remodification, genetic enhancement, and also reveals the possible recessive genes that lay dormant within the Pokemon. What recessive gene am I specifically talking about? You guessed it, the Noorb gene. Boom, son! Tentacool doesn't have a Noorb feature in its body, but you know who else does? Boom! Tentacruel. Do you know what other Pokemon this occurs to? Possibly Pineco when it evolves into Fortress, but we can't know for sure. Boom! Now if you recall, my lovely dum-dum gumdrop viewers, there's 2 more Pokemon on this list. One of them being old-fashioned Jynx. That's right, everyone. No one can forget the blackface that was given to Jynx. It was bad. Those were dark days for Nintendo. But for a second, let's pretend that it wasn't blackface. Let's pretend that this Pokemon had a Noorb trait within it. Hypothetically, Jynx could have once been a Noorb that grew up with humans, as it is the human-shaped Pokemon, and eventually adapted itself to look human, evolving to have an obvious Noorb feature in its appearance. Even with Smoochum in the picture, Smoochum could be carrying the recessive gene of a Noorb feature, but we wouldn't be able to tell until it evolved into Jynx. Just like the butterflies with the polka dots. So if that were the case, then that would mean that we could possibly say that this isn't racist. And don't get me wrong, I'm not defending it, it is racist, but this hypothesis just puts a friendlier and more scientific spin onto things with old-fashioned Jynx. Finally, we have one more Pokemon in the recessive category, Girafarig.
Girafarig? What? Girafarig doesn't have a pre-evolution or an evolution, young weed. You a big dumb poofer brain, young weed.
Shut up! Let me explain myself. Now listen closely, cause this is some news for some of ya. Girafarig originally was planned to have a pre-evolution, and that is one of the unreleased Pokemon for the 2nd generation. What Pokemon was that? Twins. If you've been in the Pokemon community recently on YouTube or the internet, you might have noticed that Nintendo released an official list of unused sprites, Pokemon, and other interesting info found in the demo of Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver. Many non-fleshed out designs were scrapped after this demo, but one Pokemon design always stood out amongst the rest, and that was Twins, the dark normal type Pokemon. As you can see, it's just 2 black rounded off figures tied together at the lower half. This Pokemon, besides there being 2 creatures attached to each other, fits the description of an orb fairly well. Sure, it's got a few new extra features, but this would have been considered a 2nd generational Pokemon, already another step away from the basic Noorb feature we could see in Pokemon like Cloyster and Ghastly from Generation 1. One could say it's twice as far away at that point, which perfectly segues me into the question of, is it perhaps 2 Noorbs? Who's to say? What I can say is that Twins was supposed to evolve at level 29. Evolve into what, you ask? Why, the next Pokemon in the Pokedex, of course, Girafarig. Originally designated to be a dark normal type instead of its modern normal psychic. We can see that Twins was meant to become this terrifying thing before it got its final design. Although, if we look at its final design, we can see how its tail looks awfully similar to the original Noorb design as well, albeit its toothy mouth. So, if Girafarig originally evolved from twins, we can see not only how twins resembled a Noorb closely as a basic Pokemon, but in its next stage of evolution as well, possibly revealing another gene from Noorb once again, perhaps even a dominant gene. And this is just a personal note, but this theory has been cooking in my brain for probably about a year or so. And Nintendo just recently released the spreadsheet with twins on it, so it just so happened that after I had already figured Noorb had to exist, Nintendo released a Pokemon that strongly resembled it. So that shit just happened to line up with what I was already thinking, so pray for me. Well, that's every single drop of evidence my lazy took has managed to scrounge up. Hold up, just kidding, I'm not done yet. I've found new evidence. So it's kind of interesting how I stumbled upon this. I was looking up information on Bulbapedia, which is like a Pokemon Wikipedia for those who don't know, because I was planning on playing as a Voltorb in my friend's Pokemon D&D campaign. And as I was looking through it, I found this beauty. Nintendo had this real Nintendo official blob right under my nose this whole time. If you don't realize why I'm jazzed, it's because it looks exactly like my interpretation of Noorb. And I can't believe I missed this because that means that a lot of Pokemon with this body type should also fall under my first category of Pokemon with obvious relation to Noorb. Like look at Voltorb for example. Noorb connects the dots of the mystery of Voltorb as well. If a Noorb had survived however many thousands or millions of years without adapting at all, perhaps it was like asleep or frozen or something, and then wakes up in a Pokeball factory, you damn well know what it's going to adapt itself into, a Pokeball. And it also makes sense as to why, quote, it was discovered that its components are not found in nature, end quote, because a Noorb had never seen a Pokeball in nature, so it adapted into a new material which was the closest it could get to a Pokeball. Damn, I'm good. To restate everything in a final summation, my hypothesis was that many Pokemon in existence came from a common ancestor Pokemon that directly descended from Mew and shared its ability to transform, making it an invincible, ever-adapting, asexually reproducing Pokemon that I have dubbed as Noorb. My evidence for this came from modern-day Pokemon that share a commonality in design, both obvious and subtle. The different environments Noorb could have adapted in play an important role in why some Pokemon look extremely different and others look very similar, and how they possibly arrived at those environments, including through an Ultra Wormhole. More of my evidence was provided by how Infinity Energy could change the genetic code of a Pokemon during the metamorphosis of evolution, unlocking the recessive trait of a Noorb feature in their new forms. And my final evidence was how Twins, the unused design of a Pokemon that closely resembled the hypothetical Pokemon Noorb, would have evolved into Girafarig, not only further strengthening that a Noorb feature could show up as a recessive trait in a Pokemon after it evolved, but that there was a Pokemon that was almost released that heavily resembled the Noorb after I had already come to the conclusion that Noorb had to exist. Along with this bitch, who was designed by Nintendo and has been here the whole time, lining up with my speculation on what the common ancestor Pokemon might have looked like. Oh my god, we're done. That's it. If you made it all the way through this video, I'm sorry for calling you all dumb gumdrops, and I am incredibly grateful that you listened to this whole thing. It was probably very dry, even for the topic of Pokemon. You don't have to take this hypothesis seriously, it's a very wild hypothesis and I would love to have anyone and everyone dismiss it or debunk it on their own. I'd love to see discussion in the comments one day, and I made it through the entire thing without one single Pokemon pun, so ha. All in all, thank you again for watching through this video. It was fun making this, and I hope to do more stuff in the nearby future. Subscribe if you want. Thank you again, and
take heed, young weeds.